Welcome back. I'm Misha. I am not a doctor. I'm not a scientist. I'm not a nutritionist. I'm just a real person like all the rest of you guys. And I was not getting answers from the medical community about the multitude of things that were going wrong in my health. And so I started on this journey because I found a system that helped me get over almost all of my diseases and disorders. Um, but I really didn't start it for that. I started it because I'd been diagnosed with type 2 diabetes. It was pretty rapid onset once we got there, and I had weight that I couldn't lose, but I needed a surgery to get that done. So that's kind of what pushed me into this forum. Now, when I talk about conditions, I'm always talking about it in relation to insulin resistance. I am by no way, no means a specialist in any of these things. I'm just helping you understand how insulin resistance is linked to these things. And by addressing the insulin resistance, we can start to feel better from a number of disorders. So let's dive in because today we're talking about PCOS. Sorry, I had it wrong earlier. So PCOS happens to be one of mm, the most requested topics that I have to talk about. Can't hear. Let's fix that. Can you hear me now? I had a headset. You guys, I do a scan for myself, energetic scan for myself every day. And I took the headset off, thought I shut it off, but apparently I didn't. So let's start over. We're talking about PCOS today. I'm talking about this not because I'm some kind of doctor or specialist or nutritionist. I'm talking about it because I am a specialist in the way that I've suffered with almost all of these things and I overcame most of them. And it was just one simple system that got me there. So I'm a specialist in what's happened in my own life, and that's the only specialist I am. All right. But I help, hopefully, help by sharing my knowledge, by sharing what I've learned from others or as a result of this whole thing. So I will be talking about the system that I use today. And you guys, it's just two simple real food products because at the bottom line, almost all of our disease and disorder is linked to our diet and lifestyle. So we're going to get into that. But PCOS, let's dive into PCOS because this is one thing that gets really misunderstood. So there are some genetic markers that are going to make someone more likely to develop PCOS than others. And so some of those markers are in the genes of our bodies, meaning that it's inside of our mitochondria and how the mitochondria function. So there's a component there with PCOS. When those mitochondrial genes are out of whack, you're more likely to develop PCOS than without. Now, there are some other genes markers that are off as well in the nuclear phases of the body that make you more susceptible to PCOS. It does tend to run in families. Now, let's take a look at what we talk about when we talk about genetics. Sometimes we're like, ooh, this family member and all the family members around them had the same thing, but these people didn't. And it's interesting to note that different family members, you could take two twins and um, a set of twins, we'll say that, and have one raised in one family and another raised in another family, and one might develop the PCOS and the other might not. How does that happen? So it's more than just this mitochondria and nuclear cell function and all of that that's going on. It has everything to do with our lifestyle. So the biggest change between what they've seen in a number of studies with children who were separated and raised in different homes, the way their genetics or their metabolism worked or these things happened is highly to do with the food they eat. So let's dive back into PCOS. So now that we know, okay, so there's a gene that sets you apart, more likely to become PCOS than somebody who doesn't have these markers. There's some other statistics that I think I want people to understand really quickly, because if you're not suffering with it, if you maybe are, but you don't know that it's you yet, look, most women with PCOS have been to at least 4 doctors to try and figure out what's going on. And it's taken at least 2 years for them to get a diagnosis to say, hey, wow, we think you have PCOS. So all this time, it wasn't just that you eat too much or you do whatever. Maybe you have this thing called PCOS, but for a lot of women, it's taking a minimum of 2 years before they get that diagnosis. And it's so easy to diagnose. So what is PCOS? Polycystic ovarian syndrome. We're going to break all that down in a second. But some of the symptoms you may be experiencing with PCOS are maybe you have excess facial hair, you have excess acne, oily skin, you're getting body hair, or your body hair is really thickening, like on your arms and your legs, that hair is just thick and dark. Maybe you're having mood swings and problems controlling anger, or you break into tears too quickly. And definitely the weight gain. Those are all pieces, but one of the biggest pieces about PCOS is this delayed um, menstrual cycle or absence of menstrual cycle that makes the periods really long. So these women bleed longer than the normal woman, and it's very painful. It's extremely painful for a polycystic ovarian woman when she does actually hit a menstrual period. So let's talk about how all of this is happening and why I'm saying it's so linked to insulin resistance. In fact, it's so linked to insulin resistance that some people are starting to say that things like erectile dysfunction and PCOS should really be retermed metabolic infertility. Metabolic, everything to do with insulin and all these things, and infertility. Now, insulin has multiple roles in the body. The one that I talk about the most is that it's delivering energy to the cells. But because of how it's delivering energy to the cells, it's regulating your metabolism, but it's also regulating other hormones, because all of these hormones interplay. Hopefully, you guys have been learning that all of these hormones interplay to make up that metabolism, right? So cortisol and your sex hormones like progesterone, estrogen, testosterone, DHEA, thyroid hormones, all of these interplay, and they make up the basis of how your body is using energy, because that's what metabolism is how you use energy. So how do we get to insulin resistance? Well, we get to insulin resistance because our foods have been changed drastically from what they used to be, and we're eating way more of them than we ever used to. So we used to have lives like I grew up on a small family farm in North Idaho. We didn't always have breakfast. There was mornings I got up to go take care of the cows and the chickens and the goats and everything, and I was still out doing chores because my brothers wouldn't get out and help. And I had to go to school with my muck boots on and whatnot. So I get it. I didn't always have breakfast. I didn't always, and I was up early working. But we have not always been having breakfast, lunch, dinner. And by the way, snackety snack, snackety snack, snackety snack. And people are always telling me, what can I have for a snack? Why do we need snacks? We don't need snacks. The food industry wants us to need snacks, so we'll buy more food, more of the crap that they've thrown together out of the waste that they have, so that they can market it to you as something that you want and need in your diet. Let's stop all that cycle. Okay, so you're getting too much food, you're getting it too often, and this is raising blood glucose. Now, I saw an interesting graphic that I want to replicate so people can better understand, and maybe I'll do a video with it. It talks about what carbohydrates are, because um, people think that carbohydrates, glucose, is just this refined sugar thing, or breads, rices, pastas, whatever, but it's not. So this chart actually breaks down in a visual form what I've been trying to say for a long time, and it makes it also see, so you can see what are highly inflammatory and what are not. But fruits and vegetables are on that carbohydrate list. Now, fruits, berries, and pears, great fruits to have to help keep your insulin resistance down. But maybe not so much a ton of pineapple and bananas, that kind of thing, right? Vegetables, it needs to be dark leafy green vegetables. A lot of the other vegetables are very high in sugars, especially things like carrots and sweet peas. So what are you going to do? How are you going to do all of this? The system that I found is just 2 drinks during the day that help me manage all of that. If you're interested in it, go to my link, ask me about it. We're going to talk about it in a little bit. But everything that changed for me changed when I started this 2 simple products. Drink it 3 points in the day. I lost 50 pounds. I reversed a number of things, including my high blood pressure. So all of those things also seem to be symptoms of people with PCOS. So when we look at PCOS and insulin resistance, if you look at the symptoms, they're very, very similar for most women. And yet, what we've been told is lose weight, you'll get better. People with PCOS are told that if they just lose the weight, the PCOS is going to get better. They're going to better manage it. But what if you don't understand what caused all the weight to pile on in the first place? And what if PCOS is probably instigating part of the weight gain? And now what do you do? Because they're not addressing the root cause and you're struggling to lose weight that you just can't. Okay. PCOS is horrible for women's self-esteem, especially, men talk about their egos, but like ladies, when we can't produce children, when we're gaining weight, when we're having this hair, when we're having mood swings, and we start to take it all on us as if it was us that's imperfect. So I want you to take a breath right now because it's the food that's making it imperfect. In fact, when we talk about weight loss, let's talk about this with PCOS. PCOS and insulin resistance are so tightly linked that 95% of obese women with PCOS have been also diagnosed with some type of insulin resistance. Now, does that mean the other 5% don't have it? I don't know that answer. But 95% have definitely been diagnosed with insulin resistance. Did they test all 95%? I think they are all 100%. I think they did. And the scores were there for insulin resistance in 95%. But do you know that there's a group of women who are so lucky, not lucky, but much more lucky than those of us who got obese with PCOS and they stay lean with PCOS, but they have all the other symptoms. So even in the lean group of PCOS women, 75% had insulin resistance. So now we look back and we say, okay, well, the doctor keeps telling you to lose weight. But what if we take a look at some of this stuff and start to really ponder what's really going on? Because if 75% of women with PCOS that are lean and don't have excess body fat also have insulin resistance, I would say that we could start to decipher that there's a problem with how we've been talking and dealing about PCOS and dealing with it. In fact, 3 years ago, when I started talking about this, people would get really angry with me that no, it's not insulin resistance. Yes, it is just genetics and whatever. They work together, you guys. Those gene mutations and the excess carbohydrates causing the spike in insulin. Now insulin goes, oh, hey, Gene, you there that we're having problems? We want to talk because I'm around to mess you up, and now you end up with PCOS. But there's a number of things. So let's dive into how insulin resistance, and I didn't explain insulin resistance very well. Carbohydrates, too much carbohydrates, too much food raises our blood sugar abnormally high. The body wants our blood sugars to be low because the blood gets really sticky, icky when it's full of sugar and it starts to cause problems. So the body's like, hey, we got to get this sugar out of here. It calls to the pancreas to produce insulin, and that insulin then starts to carry that energy and deliver it to all the cells of the body. Now, that's a great thing to happen. But what's happening is we're inundating our body with all of the food that we're eating, with all of the junk food we're eating, all the carbohydrates we're eating. And our blood sugars are high all the time, which means our insulin levels are high all the time. And now we have a problem because the cells start to say, oof, insulin, you were fine when you knocked on my door, every once in a while and seemed to know when I needed energy and you brought it to me. But now you're knocking on my door all the time. I have enough of your energy. I don't want to hear from you anymore. I'm just done. And the cells start to shut down to insulin, and that's insulin resistance. Can we eat whole wheat bread once a day like Ezekiel bread or Dave's Killer Bread? So those grains, understand that grains, whether it's in a highly reformed form or whether it's in this really great, nutty, grainy thing that you think is so healthy, it's still spiking your insulin. Hey, Edwin, it's still spiking your insulin. You could have a white piece of bread and a whole grain piece of bread, and your insulin and your blood sugars are going to spike about the same. Now, is there a difference in nutritional value in the breads? Yeah. But if you're simply talking about keeping your insulin down, stay away from grains as much as possible. Can you have a slice? If you're doing the system that I'm doing, yes, you can have a slice. If you're not, I would be very careful with it, okay? So the bread type has more to do with the other nutrients than the ability to slow down a blood sugar spike. In fact, a lot of keto breads that don't have grains or whatever in them are actually still spiking insulin quite a bit. And there's been a lot of warnings about that, plus the fact that they're just so full of um, preservatives and stuff that we just don't want in our body if we're really trying to be healthy. So, you know what? Here's the truth, you guys. I don't eat a lot of bread, but this weekend I had a really big craving for red meat. I don't eat burgers very often. I had 2 hamburgers this weekend, like, and I got them both from Red Robin, a Whiskey River barbecue burger and a bonsai burger. So, did I have some bread this weekend? Yes, I did. I also just had this before I had that burger with the bread. There was part of me that was like, "Oh, we'll just get it in a lettuce wrap and skip the bread." And I was like, "No, I want the whole burger experience. I'm just hungry for it this weekend." So yes, you can have some bread. I have bread when I want it, but I just am very careful about having it every day. So yesterday I didn't have bread. I had primarily proteins and vegetables, but I didn't have any bread. Ezekiel bread is so good. It's complete protein as well. And I'm not going to deny that, but you are still spiking your insulin with the bread. Maybe a little less than white bread, but you're still spiking your insulin with the bread. The things that aren't going to spike your insulin so high are those dark leafy green above ground vegetables, fruits like berries and pears, and meat and fat. The rest of it, the grains and all of that, they're spiking your insulin. The starchies, those are spiking your insulin. So I'm not denying that Ezekiel bread has some benefits, but you asked about it for insulin, and so I'm going to be honest about that. Now, I want to get back to PCOS. So if you guys are interested in how I got all this under control and still eat the way I want to eat for the most part with just managing some simple tips, let me know, because it's just 2 drinks that I have at 3 points during the day. And I actually have it more than that because I like it so much. All right. PCOS. So now we know, back on track, insulin resistance is causing all of this cellular dysfunction in our body. We just are not able to take up insulin. Now, before I dive into PCOS, I want to describe 2 things. There's more and more research that now says that the pancreas doesn't do all of the insulin production. They don't have the exact mechanism, but they're suspecting that the brain produces its own insulin as well. So now we're getting insulin from the pancreas, we're getting insulin from the brain, and the brain is becoming insulin resistant at the same rate as the body. This plays into PCOS how? Because, right, I'm talking about your brain, and yet we're supposed to be talking about PCOS, something that's happening in your ovaries. So let's talk about a woman's menstrual cycle. All right, so when you start out your menstrual cycle, estrogens are low, testosterones are a little bit higher, but here's what's happening. Your ovaries are converting, or this the place where testosterone gets converted into estrogens, and progesterone is an estrogen. So that's a really vital part, right? We're down talking about the ovaries. So we need our ovaries functioning properly. We need them utilizing this thing called aromatase that tells the estrogens to convert into, it tells the testosterones, androgens, to convert into estrogens. That aromatase balance is highly important. That's what's allowing that androgen to convert to estrogens, including progesterone. In a PCOS body, insulin is really messing with those aromatase levels. So the ovaries, although there's androgens coming in, they're unable to convert into estrogens because the aromatase balance is off. So that one little thing that flips from an androgen to an estrogen is deficient in a person with insulin resistance. And now the ovaries just can't do their job. So now let's talk about how that happens with PCOS and why that's important in the cycle. So early on in the cycle, we don't really need a lot of estrogens. We have more testosterone naturally. And the brain is producing this thing called follicle stimulating hormone. It goes from the hypothalamus, goes to the pituitary gland. The pituitary gland creates this follicle stimulating hormone. And what that means is somewhat like it sounds. So it's stimulating the release of immature eggs into the ovaries. Follicle, ovary, or egg, stimulating, meaning it's getting them up and going, hormones. So FSH it needs to be produced so that we can get these eggs. Um, and then at some point during the cycle, as the eggs start to mature, one egg becomes dominant enough that it pushes through and becomes ovulation. At this point, when that one egg becomes mature enough, it cues that ovulation cues the body to produce LH, luteinizing hormone, which goes back and tells all these other eggs that are not mature enough to be uh, viable, right, for pregnancy. It starts to disintegrate those. It tells them to basically go away, and they start to dissipate out the ovaries, and the ovaries reset at some point if that one egg isn't inseminated, and the whole cycle starts over again. But really, in the middle of this cycle, what's happening is the body starts to say, hey, we have these eggs. We need estrogen in there to help these eggs along, to help them mature. And so the body starts to tell the brain that we need this estrogen conversion going on. But remember, in your ovaries, the aromatase is all jacked up because your insulin levels are so high. And even though the brain says, hey, we need estrogen to help these eggs along, the ovaries just can't do it. There's plenty of testosterone there, but they can't convert it, or androgens, into this estrogen and progesterone that we need for female cycle. So the periods are long, there's long periods in between. And when they do happen, there's this buildup of eggs going on. One finally gets strong enough to push through and ovulate, and you have a period, but the period is really long and painful because now you have all of these eggs that didn't dissipate hanging around in the ovaries, causing this little bumpy texture in the ovaries because they're pockets of cysts in your ovaries. So poly, mini, cystic, little cysts from the eggs that did not dissipate, that fallen into the ovary linings, and now you're painful, your periods are longer. The egg that comes out may be mature enough, but it's probably not viable anymore because it took so long to get out. Now you're having problems conceiving as well. So long, painful periods, problems conceiving, infertility, all of it starts to link back to this conversion of androgens to estrogens and what the ovaries are signaling the brain to do, and their ability to signal the brain, or the ability for that to use the cues that are coming back to convert androgens into estrogens. So that's a little bit about what really is going on with PCOS. So when we listen to doctors who are like, well, just lose weight and your PCOS symptoms would get better, wouldn't it be wonderful? Wouldn't it be freaking amazing if any of them said, at the onset of PCOS, she started to gain weight, or she started to gain weight and then we realized it was PCOS. So the best answer I have is to tell her to go lose weight. But I haven't sat down, I'm talking about a medical profession, I haven't sat down and told her what's causing the weight gain so that she can actually go lose the weight and start to get PCOS under control. And more than getting the weight off, it's this insulin control that's going to help with PCOS. I have a number of young ladies. I always talk about a couple. I'm starting to have some new, because the I can't get it all out at once. Most of my clients are older, but in that they have some younger women who have some PCOS and whatnot. So there was one young woman who started the system, was really wanted children. And it reminds me of my story when I was younger because I really wanted children. And I remember praying and being like, I was so angry with God because I wanted kids so bad. And I knew that I was going to give my kids everything. And I knew that my family was going to be the most important thing. And I couldn't have kids. And yet there was a young woman that I worked with. She was a designer at one of the factories that I worked at before I became the designer. And she would take off after work and go to the bar. She would go get her kids and go to the bar. And her 4 kids would sit in that car for hours without dinner, without anything. Maybe she tossed them some chips and a couple of waters. And they would sit in that car in the heat of the summer, in the cold of winter. And in my back of my mind, I'm like, Why is it fair, God, that you're allowing this girl to continue to have kids and she doesn't even treat them well? And she's just they're like, I don't know, they're like toys she puts on a shelf, and yet I want kids so bad and you can't give them to me. And back then they weren't really diagnosing PCOS. So I get the struggle. But this young woman who wanted children, her doctor was telling her because of her PCOS, she was not likely to ever have children, started learning about the system, found it right here on TikTok like you guys did, started the system. Month 1, her period started to be normalized to about that 4-week cycle, and she was excited. Month 2, it was very regular, just right in that 4-week cycle, 28 days where it should be, and she was, like, elated. Month 3, no period, and now she's devastated. Now she's like, "I thought I found the thing. I thought I found what was gonna happen. I found what was gonna help me," and that, disappointment actually turned into joy because she then later found she skipped her period because against all odds, she was then pregnant. That baby is now 2.5 years old. Um, yeah, unexplained infertility. And that all you guys, most all of it, 95% seems to be the number that comes out in these papers a lot. 95% and 70% are a couple of the numbers I see a lot. But wouldn't it be great if you could just understand that it's the environment that we have today, the lifestyle that we have today, the food that we have today that's causing this to be a problem, and that if we were able to address those things, the problem would alleviate itself with or without the gene, right? So the people with the genes, and some of them are more prevalent towards PCOS than others. Yes, some women are going to have a harder time than others, but the majority of women, just by addressing this lifestyle change, are going to get relief from their PCOS. And we've seen it time and time again where girls who had irregular periods are now having regular periods. Girls who wanted to have kids have now been able to have kids when they were told they weren't going to be able to. I wish I would have known this when I was young and married and trying to have a family. It would have made so much more sense. I went to the doctor twice a month, every month, so much so that it caused because my in-laws were nosy and they didn't understand what was going on. They didn't understand that I was actually driving into the city to have these tests done and try and figure out the fertility because we wanted kids. They just thought I was spending money, whatever. But I didn't know in those every 2-week visits and all the tests and all the stuff that was being given, that I was already a bit insulin resistant, and that if we had addressed that, I would have had a much easier time having children. I had been told so often that I would never have children. I ended up having 2 kids, and I always called them immaculate conception because I had kids against all odds. And I know that a number of young ladies are out there dealing with that. If you understand that PCOS is really just metabolic infertility, meaning your metabolism is jacked up and it's messing with your sex hormones, which is messing with your menstrual cycle, which is messing with your ability to conceive. How much easier would that be for you to have a life that's healthy? And by the way, getting insulin resistance under control before you conceive, whether you have the PCOS genes, one of the many, or not, PCOS related genes, um, it's important to understand that a woman becomes insulin resistant in pregnancy. So if you're already insulin resistant before pregnancy, you're probably pre-diabetic or gestational diabetes during pregnancy. Now, most women need to be, or not most women, I'm just going to say women need to be insulin resistant during pregnancy because it's diverting the energy from you to the baby. So you're not taking in as much energy and the baby's getting the lion's share of the energy. So the insulin resistance in pregnancy serves a purpose, and it's only meant to be there for a short time. You start to gain weight, you start to have inflammation, you start to recognize all the things that people with diabetes feel. Maybe you don't know that that's what you're feeling, but that's what's happening to you. So if you're insulin resistant, highly insulin resistant, so much so even that you become diagnosed with gestational diabetes or actually tip off type 2 diabetes during pregnancy, you're more likely to have a child who's going to suffer with PCOS. We talked about autism on Friday and how important it is to keep your insulin resistance under control to help with the passing of that particular um, diagnosis. I'm trying to really work away from using disorder with that. That diagnosis links back highly to whether a parent was or both parents were diabetic during conception, and then especially the mom during pregnancy. So understand that that pregnancy piece for mom and keeping her insulin resistance under control has everything to do with the health of that baby coming out and what that baby is going to be facing the rest of their life. So you want to give your kids a good chance of succeeding in life with health issues and start to dampen down some of these diagnoses that don't need to be happening so often. Get your insulin under control, get your carbohydrates under control, get your blood sugars under control. Your kids are going to thank you for it, even if they don't know what you did for them. And you're going to be happier knowing that your kids are healthier. Okay, so PCOS. Does anybody have questions about PCOS now and what is happening and why it's happening to women with insulin resistance? There was another statistic that I think I wanted to talk about. Nope, I think we got them all. All right, so you guys just know that getting your PCOS under control is going to be about getting your insulin resistance under control. Now, when I talk about that, how I got my insulin resistance under control and started alleviating a number of these diagnoses that you see up here or over here for myself was just these two products. So it's a tea that I have in the morning, a tea that I have in the afternoon, and a pre-meal drink that I have before my biggest meal of the day. Now, I still have a pre-meal drink before every meal I have because if I was so insulin resistant that I was diabetic and I had all of this stuff going on, I really want to make sure that I'm protecting myself. This is like a prophylactic for high carbohydrate levels. This reduces a carbohydrate spike by 20% when you eat. Now, they've changed it to have this before your biggest meal of the day. Fiber will stay present in your system if it's the right kinds of fiber and do its job and compounding for 4 to 5 hours after you take it. So what I say is have it before your first meal and then have your second meal within about that 5-hour range. This is still going to be in your system working, but it's also helping rebuild the probiotics because it has prebiotics. So now gut health prebiotics, what the probiotics feed on, building healthier gut microbiome. This fiber is helping me do that, so that's why I do that. The tea that I drink in the morning gives me mental clarity and energy. This helps increase a GLP-1 production, glucagon-like peptide, by 70%. It also increases a wellness score, that mental health, by 70%. Now, we're talking about when we have all of this happening. It's not just the body that's getting better from insulin resistance, it's the brain. So the mood swings are starting to go away, those cues for follicle stimulating, luteinizing hormones, and plus ghrelin, leptin, all of the hunger, satiety hormones, all of that starts to normalize when we get the brain healthy. This tea, one of the reasons we're doing 2 of these a day is it's so important in getting this thing up here healthy and functioning enough that it gives the right cues to the rest of the hormones in our body. So we start to do better metabolically, meaning better with things like PCOS and erectile dysfunction. I can talk about erectile dysfunction in a little bit if anybody wants to know. But yeah, so now I have a tea in the morning, which is in my paint covered. I've been painting my kids' this house, my paint covered Stanley cup, whatever, stainless steel. And you guys, I like the fiber. I do have 3 to 4 servings of fiber a day. And why? Because when you put fiber in with carbohydrates, it's slowing that carbohydrate spike down. Great. What does that mean to you? That means that the insulin spike starts to come down. That means your insulin levels are starting to come down and normalize. So I take about this much water. I've been doing this in the mornings, which is good because I need it in the mornings anyway. So you guys might as well just see. So I just pour that packet into a little bit of water and we go just about 4 shakes is what I do. Now it's nice and mixed. It's already going to start to thicken. So I drink this down. Now I mix it in that much water because I don't want to have to chug that much. I don't want it getting thick too soon. And then I'll just chase it with some water. Okay. But you'll already start to see it thickening in here. And that's part of the magic of this particular fiber. We also know that most of us are not getting in enough fiber in the day. Most of us only getting in 16 grams of fiber at most. And there were multiple studies done and research papers written on this fiber balancing. So what they were looking at, and most of them were around the 16 grams of fiber where people were before. They took these studies and they had one group just stay the same and one group almost double or over double their fiber intake. The people with the doubled fiber intake had better insulin levels over time than the people who were not. They had less glucose spikes. They were able just to manage that glucose much better in their body by adding fiber in at the 37 grams part, right? So now what was happening is when they had fiber in the morning before their first meal, it reduced that blood glucose spike by 13%. 4 to 5 hours later, it had reduced the blood glucose spike by 60% when the person ate that next meal. Then if they added another fiber before dinner, at dinner the glucose spike was down by 30%. So the initial fiber was most of the way out, but you add another in, and so now it's doing its job in reducing blood glucose spikes. So fiber to me is still extremely important. The system is a tea in the morning, a tea in the afternoon, and a fiber before your biggest meal. There are people like me who still want to have 2 fiber a day. You can still get an extra box of that to balance it out. And so what my day normally really looks like is, I just threw that packet away, is 2 tea, 2 fiber a day. And that's how I live my life and have been able to maintain my health. In fact, I woke up this morning, I don't have my watch on me, and I had to take it off because I wore it too tight last night. But my morning blood pressure this morning was like 112/74. Why is that important? PCOS, by the way, if you have PCOS, you may start to be seeing your blood pressure going up as well. Isn't that interesting that it's a symptom with PCOS and a symptom with insulin resistance? So my blood pressure used to be like 180/150 at some point every day. The lowest we could get it to was 150/110, and that was on dual therapy to help my blood pressure, because my doctor was terrified, as I was, that I was just going to have a heart attack in the middle of the night and not be there the next day. And I don't say that lightly because that was really terrifying for me. But now no medications, and my blood pressure is regularly 112/74, in that range every single morning. My blood sugars are in the like 96 to 100 range every single morning fasted. So all of that's been managed, got me off of 13 medications by doing this one system. And that's all I had to do was the system to reverse all of the stuff that has been happening for me and get my health back. It's the most freeing thing that that I think I've experienced in my life, and I will probably go to the end of my life talking about this system because it's made such a change, not just for me, but for the thousands of people, the millions of people who have tried the system and understood what's really happening. You guys understand this. You didn't get sick overnight. It's not going to get better overnight. These are real food products, gluten-free, halal, and they're specifically designed for your metabolism. It's not like, oh, hey, fiber is great, so we're going to produce a new label for our old fiber, and we're going to say that it's, so amazing for everything. And yet this was like about 13% reduction of glucose. This reduces by 20% because there's 7 different soluble and insoluble fibers in it that are specifically designed to help with blood glucose regulation, blood lipid regulation, and your thanks, Nelda. And now you're starting to really have some success with insulin resistance. But there's one more piece to that, and that is some time-based eating or intermittent fasting. We just don't need to eat that often. I get messages from people a lot and I get it. Some people have medications. One person has medications that they have to take 12 hours apart. So how do they, hey, Kraz, and thank you, Nelda. How do they do intermittent fasting and be able to do their medications? Well, there are some foods that don't really spike your insulin. So for us, what we want to do is pay attention to anything that's going to spike the insulin. If you need to take a medication in the morning and you're in a fasted state, have some fats with it. I've been hearing a lot about macadamia nuts, so I'm going to take a look at those. The omega 7s in those are supposed to be really great. But fats in the morning while you're taking those are going to be great for you. If you need something more solid, try a boiled egg or two. It's not going to spike your insulin as long as you're not throwing in a bunch of sugar. And so that egg and avocado, no toast, no other crazy stuff. You can have a little bit of that in the morning to have your medication. You'll ease your stomach. You'll still be working on this insulin fasting, insulin resistance thing. So let's talk about macros really quick and why I'm saying that. We have 3 macros in our food. So macros are big nutrients. Micros are the smaller nutrients like vitamins and minerals. So the big 3 are carbohydrates, proteins, and fats. When we look at these 3 macros, first thing I want to say is if it's not a protein and it's not a fat, it is a carbohydrate. And so remember, carbohydrates could be starchy vegetables. They're any vegetables. They could be the grains. They could be the fruits. They could be the refined sugars and stuff. All of that is carbohydrate. Basically, if it's not a fat and it's not a protein, it is a carbohydrate. Carbohydrates are giving your body energy and spiking your insulin. So if you need to do this, stay away from those things during that first meal when you're trying to get those morning vitamins in, or have a good breakfast. There's nothing that says you can't have a good breakfast. Have a good breakfast. Have your next meal within 8 hours, and then just have a small thing of fat or egg at your dinner meal when you're getting ready for bed. You guys should not be eating so much stuff that takes a high amount of digestion just before bed. Anyway, that actually raises your cortisol level as your body's continually trying to digest throughout the night. So you can still do this and still have medications about 12 hours apart. You just got to make sure that you're not getting in carbohydrates with one of the meals and that you're not overeating. You're just getting in enough to take that medication. You can still do it. But intermittent fasting is huge for this. We want those insulin levels down, and we want to get them to trend that they're only up when we absolutely need them. Right now, 93% of the population has a metabolic disorder, and that means our insulin levels are too high all of the time. How do you know your cortisol is high? Your heart's going to be racing a little bit. You're going to feel a little bit agitated. You're just going to feel like you're on edge a little bit. You may be having some weight gain from cortisol. You may be feeling fatigued at weird points during the day. If you're not getting in enough sleep and you're under a lot of stress. And so you guys, these things, this is the most easily managed thing for me to address my diabetes, right? Or my insulin resistance. When we start to talk about all of these things like cortisol, leptin and ghrelin, your hunger and satiety hormones, your thyroid, which regulates your cellular energy, your sex hormones, all of these things, we have to understand that cortisol plays intricately with this. Cortisol also intricately plays with insulin resistance. Now, if your cortisol level is high, all of the others are going to be off. So things like surgeries, injuries, toxic bosses, narcissistic spouses, the inability to sleep, all of those things cause your cortisol levels to rise. Okay. So if you're really worried about cortisol levels, you've got to start doing some meditation and give your brain and focus on gratitude and get some good sleep and hydrate really well. You guys, most of us are not getting in enough sleep. Okay. One of the big things, because I've been still having some health issues that I'm not going to go into right now, but it has everything and nothing to do with insulin resistance. It has everything to do with insulin resistance in the fact that had any physician, anybody told me about insulin resistance 20, 30 years ago, there's a number of things I wouldn't have had wrong today. I likely would never have had my gallbladder removed. I may not have had my hips or my knee replaced. A number of things that have happened. My eyesight might not have started going bad so early. It all linked into insulin resistance. It all got better. By the way, my glasses used to be a 3.0 diopter. They're now 1.75. So I'm 60 and my eyesight's better than it was at 45 because I got my insulin resistance under control. Okay. Cortisol, though, you guys, every little stress you have is going to build, and that cortisol level, you've got to take care of it. Unplug. There's a reason I don't pick up my phone on the weekends anymore. I always talk about my family, and that's great. But you know what's also happening when I'm putting down the phone and I'm giving love and attention to my family? My cortisol levels are coming down, right? So is it just really selfless that I'm doing? No, it's very selfish when I do these things. When I don't do business on the weekend, it's because I'm addressing my own health issues. I'm trying to make sure I get to bed early and get enough time. In fact, I set it up so that I can start tracking my sleep with my watch, like how many hours of sleep am I actually getting a night? Am I getting enough rest to keep my cortisol levels down so that my insulin levels don't spike? Cortisol sets you into this fight or flight response. Okay. So cortisol is also telling your body, hey body, I need energy. I need to get up and move. I've got to be on alert. Cortisol is the fight or flight hormone. So cortisol is going to start telling your body, give us energy. And so it's going to cue the pancreas. It's going to maybe cue some hunger, but it's also going to cue the pancreas to create this insulin to start delivering that energy. Now we're exacerbating insulin resistance. We're feeling fatigued and tired, and yet the body wants to go, go. So now we're overeating all the wrong things, sugars and salts and starches and whatnot to try and get that quick energy. In fact, how many of you guys have been heard the whole brilliant, I'm being facetious, um, statement that if you have diabetes, you need to eat every 2 hours, and that if you're having a blood sugar crash, you need to have high sugar to get your energy back up. I worked in nursing homes before I became a medical assistant. And I mean, from the time I was a 15-year-old, I was working in nursing homes and retirement homes. And it was constant that we would have to go to the diabetics and give them fruit juice about every 2 hours to make sure their blood sugars didn't crash. Well, what why didn't we ever take a look at insulin resistance and understand that by switching them from a carb-laden diet to a protein and fat dominant diet, that would alleviate all the pills and all the other stuff that were going on with these people. We need to start addressing that. Danielle, resonates so much with you. Just been diagnosed with PCOS, had your gallbladder removed, DDD in your spine, falling apart, and I can't lose weight, and that's not helping your issues. Absolutely. And Danielle, when you have excess weight on, it makes your body hurt even worse. So now insulin resistance is causing some nerve pathway disorders. And I talk about that on other podcasts. But now all of this is going on, and you throw PCOS in on the top of that, and then the excess weight that comes on, and the pressure, and the just inflammation and the excess weight that joints are having to carry. And yeah, you start to feel like you're falling apart, right? So I would love to talk to you and I'd love to help you out. I'm going to put a link in over here for the system. You guys, it's the simplest thing I've ever done. I do have some pictures and I haven't shown these for a while, so I do want to show these. Now, you guys, I'm going to flip my camera around because I have the pictures on my computer. Doesn't mean I'm live casting somebody else's live. That somebody said that last week. All right. So we're going to take a look at some other people besides just me. Let's go, if we can flip this around. There we go. All right. So this was me, you guys. This was me before the system. I had two hips replaced and a knee got replaced, and I couldn't walk up and down stairs. I was falling apart. My blood pressure was crazy. But look at that That's a PCOS and insulin resistant body. In 5 months, I was able to lose 55 pounds, get everything under control, and get all of this hypertension, hyperlipidemia, sleep apnea, heartburn, chronic fatigue, chronic pain, arthritis, leg cramps, all of that was able to be gotten under control just by doing the system. But it's not just me. So I talk about my story a lot, but look, there's Alexis. I just saw an amazing picture by Alexis this morning where she's talking about her own journey. She's also done the system. She's now a size 6, not a size 8. She didn't have diabetes, but she had a family history of it and knew how impactful it was on um, her whole family if she were to end up with diabetes and sick. So she didn't want that, and there we are. So she started the system and started educating and started the system to help her family understand they needed it. And now she's much healthier and is impacting people around the world by letting them know about insulin resistance. But we have this one is this is an insulin resistant belly on the left. And this dear lady was having problems with depression and diverticulitis and kidney issues and anxiety and joint pain. And she's been able to lose over 45 pounds and maintain that, get her health back, get her mental state back, all by doing this one system that I'm talking about now. So that's a huge change for a 50-something-year-old woman. And then there's my gal Christy down in Idaho, competitive bodybuilder, coach, and trainer. And this was her in off season before. What we didn't know here was that her doctor was telling her that she had diabetes and that her whole life was going to crash in 6 months if she didn't get something under control. You look at her, and anybody who knew her would never know that she was suffering so much with health issues. And yet she started the Feel Great system. And in the same point in off season, this on the right was her then. So about the same weight, but look at all the inflammation that's down. Look at all of her face is thinner. Her abs are more showing more. It's because she got rid of inflammation and excess fat that had to do with insulin resistance. Why is her weight the same? Because she was able to put on more lean mass instead of all of that inflammation. So do you have to be overweight for the system to be good for you? No. There's Jason, who's now lost like 190 pounds. So I need an updated picture of him, but he lost 190 pounds. He had hypertension, hyperlipidemia, sleep apnea, chronic fatigue, chronic pain. He was losing his eyesight. We didn't talk about it back then. He's been more open now. Yes, he was having some erectile dysfunction and got that back by addressing his metabolism. So now everything looks much better for him. That's 190 pounds down. This guy has ended up losing in a year and a half just by adding this. Now, Cindy has lost over 150 pounds and got rid of her hypertension. She was pre-diabetic, and so her A1C was 5.9, and it's now 5.5. Now, 5.9 is not high. It's, I think the break point, depending on who you talk to, is 5.7 or 5.6. They're thinking about taking that back down to like 5.3 on the A1C as an indicator whether you're pre-diabetic or not. But her A1C went down. She lost this weight. Her hypertension is down. Her husband, who's type 2 diabetic, has been able to get off of his medications and reverse his type 2 diabetes symptoms by the same system. And then there's Karen, whose A1C was 11.5. It's now down to normal range because I need to update her numbers. But she didn't have as much weight to lose, right? But she was extremely diabetic. Remember Cindy? She was really overweight, but she was not really diabetic. We'll talk about that in a little bit. So be aware, I talked about it a little bit on Friday. You guys understand that when you're talking about your metabolism, your specific parameters around it are going to be different. Cindy and I had very similar diets, and yet she lost 160 pounds. I was able to lose 50, and then I started struggling. Well, Cindy didn't have her gallbladder out. She didn't have all the other things going on. She didn't have hypothyroidism. She didn't have stuff. So please stop comparing yourself to everyone else and understand your own metabolism has to do with your genetics and your lifestyle as well. It's not just about cutting calories. So then there's Stephanie, who I think you all know, Steph Coke 1111 here on TikTok. Um, Now she didn't think she had well, she didn't. None of us thought she had weight to lose. She was talking about her weight later, and she was like, "Well, I don't have a great story, but yet I watched her ADHD get under control. She's much more mellow, focused, and on point now than she was before. Her mood dysregulation is much better now. She's having more cognitive function than she's ever had, and then she did lose." Like 30 pounds and went from a size 14 to a size 6 and ended up with six-pack abs, even 4-pack abs, she calls them, even though she never does sit-ups, just by getting her insulin under control. And then there's Dia, lovely Dia up in North Idaho. She had cancer issues. She had um, gut issues. She was suffering with a number of things that she was not able to get help from. She started the system, lost over 50 pounds, improved her gut health, loved it so much. She has her husband and her children doing it. And by the way, her son is a type 1 diabetic. So why is this scrolling through? So this, wow. Oh, it's my hand. Okay. So Dia's son, type 1 diabetic, can type 1 diabetics do it? Yes, because insulin resistance affects type 1 diabetics the same as it does type 2. The difference between type 1 and type 2 is this beta cell in the pancreas and whether it can produce insulin or not and how much insulin it's producing. By the way, type 2 diabetics, if you stay type 2 diabetic for a long time and you don't get it under control, you're at risk of becoming um, more type 1 diabetes, where your pancreas cannot produce insulin anymore. That long-term overworking of your pancreas is going to cause your pancreas to shut down. Get it under control now before you end up there. But can kids do it? Absolutely. We have 2-year-olds who are drinking parts of their parents' fiber and drinking the tea. And so, yeah, kids are able to do it. Pregnant women have done it. There is a warning because they have to always have a warning for pregnancy. But we have Kieran Malik had this throughout her entire pregnancy, had an extremely healthy baby. The doctors and nurses were talking about how healthy, alert, and amazing the baby's skin was, everything. The mom had done the system the entire time she was pregnant, and that baby now sees mom and dad doing the system, and so the baby does it in small amounts as well. So kids, and that's important because we're talking about PCOS today. But I want to put this back up because I'm going to talk about one little thing before I get off of here. And then if we want to expand on that at some point, let me know. But here's the thing. Kids, and insulin resistance. We have more and more kids who are ending up with insulin resistance than ever before. We have kids as young as 6 years old being diagnosed with non-alcoholic fatty liver, with prediabetes, with diabetes, and that's devastating for these kids. Along with it, what happens is it starts to mess with their sexual hormone function, just like it did with adults. Now, in a brain that's developing and is highly insulin resistant, not getting the cues it needs, not getting the energy it needs, and the hormones changing drastically. And these kids who are just starting to get into this phase where they should have hormones, it's causing a lot of disruption. Kids are going through puberty much quicker than they ever have. About 100 years ago, kids didn't go through puberty until about age 16. And then early on in in the 19th century, yeah, in the 1900s, it went down to like, or I should say midway through, around the 1980s, they started realizing that kids were going through puberty at the age of like 11 or 12. Now in 2024, they're saying that kids are hitting puberty at 8 or 9. And why is that important? And so now we're seeing more and more young girls with PCOS because there's this hormonal dysregulation. We've now messed with how kids are developing, and our genetics are not prepared for this. So kids are finding themselves confused over sexual desires that they should not be having yet, or things that are going on in their body because of this hormone dysregulation at an early age. And it's causing um, mood swings, it's causing um, anxiety and depression and confusion over their sexuality. And it's all because kids are going through puberty way too soon, men, boys, and girls. And so, this whole thing with insulin resistance is hugely important to all of us, not just the childbearing age women, women in menopause, children. We all need to pay attention for our sex hormone production to insulin resistance. By the way, I haven't talked about that yet because we were talking about PCOS, but understand, ladies, in menopause, you're already not producing enough hormone. If you have insulin resistance, and that insulin resistance is now taking the lessened amount of hormones that you have and interfering with that conversion of androgens to estrogens, now you're having hot flashes, and now you're having weight gain, and now you're having brain fog, and now you're having a lot of things that are going on. And would you like to know that it just would be addressing your diet and your lifestyle by understanding that our food has changed? It encompasses so much stuff, and I think it's really important for everyone to understand. So again, you guys, the system is, if you can find it in my profile, just go up here and right below the red light symbols, there's a link. Now, people have said your links aren't working, and I keep testing the links and I keep sending them to other people. So you got to clear your cache. You got to maybe restart your phone, and the links work fine. The links are working fine. So with the exception of my web page, and I haven't had somebody look at it yet, but the redirect for my web page is weird. So you're going to end up at a little page that says, oops, let's take you home, and it has my picture on it. You're fine. It's just a redirect issue, but the links are working. So a tea in the morning, a tea in the afternoon, when my energy starts to crash, when I start to have cravings, it shuts all of that down. It gives me more energy. It gets energy to my brain, which is where a lot of these cues for the things like cortisol, luteinizing hormone, follicle stimulating hormone, thyroid stimulating hormone, all this stuff happens in the brain. We got to take care of the brain, and everything else gets better. That's why we're doing 2 T's, the brain, but also that GLP-1 glucagon-like peptide that people are injecting for $300 to $1,500 a month. This increases it naturally, normally in your body by 70%. Why? Because we're not getting these nutrients in our daily diet, and that's how this is happening. So this is giving me a ton of nutrients, antioxidants, anti-cancer properties, helping me feel full, so I'm not wanting to snack, and just giving me mental energy and clarity so that I can do all this research and figure out all this stuff to come here and talk to you guys about it. And then just the fiber. Again, I do fiber before I eat anything. The rest of y'all can just do 1 fiber a day. I would do it before your first meal, and then have your next meal within 4 to 5 hours, and then you should be well regulated. A lot of people are doing this in the meal with the most carbohydrates, and that's often dinner time for most of us. So you do it where it fits for you, and we'll talk about that, and I help coach you through all of that. By the way, you do get a 90-day money-back guarantee. You get a low price guarantee, you get a quality guarantee, and you get to have me help you through it and ask me questions whenever you need, as a coach to give you those answers. So you get all of that when you purchase through my link. If you go to Amazon, eBay, Walmart, you're going to pay more, and you're not getting any of the guarantees. So please don't do that. There is no authorized seller on Amazon, eBay, Walmart, any of those clearinghouse places. So all right, guys, I'm going to be back tomorrow. Not sure what I want to talk about yet tomorrow. We talked about thyroid last week. We talked about autism and a little bit of brain function. What about kidneys, liver, or skin? Does anybody have anything they want me to go over, or sleep apnea, or vertigo? Anything that any of you guys want me to try and explain how insulin resistance is leading into that, linking to that, so that you can get your health under control? That's what I'm here about. Liver, liver, good one. Liver is super important. You're going to give me some work to do, Ro. I think all of these are so complex. PCOS is complex. Autism is very complex. And the liver, you guys, that liver, we're going to talk about liver tomorrow because the liver is like a superhero in your body, and yet we're abusing it drastically. When I talked about fruit juice, I want to round back because I realized I never mentioned anything, but I just kept saying fruit juice like it was the devil because it is. You know, stop drinking fruit juice. Fruit juice is just carbohydrates unwrapped from the fiber that helps slow it down, and it's exacerbating your insulin resistance. You have to have fiber with your carbohydrates. And besides that, when you drink a glass of orange juice, they're like, oh, you're getting in all this extra vitamin C. You're getting a whole lot of extra fructose as well. And tomorrow we're going to talk about how your liver is where all of that fructose has to go through and why it's causing damage, and how all of this excess fruit juice and fruit bowls and all of that is one of the big reasons why we're seeing these kids with non-alcoholic fatty liver disease as early as 6 years old. So we'll talk about that tomorrow. Thanks for joining me today. And then Sadie, the TikTok verification thing. Okay, so Sadie, we'll talk about sleep apnea then. All right, TikTok was messing with me. We'll talk about sleep apnea then on Wednesday, and tomorrow we're going to talk about liver. And then you guys, if there's something on this list that resonates with you, that you're like, hey, that sounds like me, or maybe I have 8 or 9 of these symptoms, but this one symptom is really concerning me, and I don't understand why you're saying it could get better. Let me know what those are, and I'd love to talk about them. So I hope everybody has some clarity on PCOS now. If you're getting insufficient answers from your doctors, please just understand it doesn't take medications. It doesn't take a ton of tests and stuff for you to start understanding that the one thing that's affecting us overall is insulin resistance. Now, I do want to talk about like carnivore and meat and stuff later on this week. Um, and I also want to talk about the fact that a lot of people think that the US is the worst, and yet we are not by far the worst for insulin resistance and metabolic issues. There's a reason this system is so sought after in the Pacific Rim because they're worse off than us. But anyway, know that it's not all an American thing, it's worldwide, and we all need this help because we've all been impacted by our modern food and the misinformation we've been given throughout the last 50 years. So we'll talk about all that the rest of this week. Liver tomorrow, sleep apnea Wednesday. Sadie, thanks for asking because I haven't talked about sleep apnea for a while, and it's really important. And the mechanisms of how that happens are really interesting. And I would love to dive into that. By the way, I did suffer with sleep apnea. I woke up 60 times an hour. I had sleep studies done 60 times an hour. So we'll talk about that on Wednesday. I no longer wake up 60 times an hour, and I'm not on any medications for my sleep apnea, nor do I use a CPAP. So we'll talk about that. And then you guys will just see you tomorrow. Thank you. Thank you for joining me today. I hope your weekend was amazing. I hope you have a blessed week this week. Um, so Chris, I'll send me a personal message and I'll send you the link directly. It doesn't like to let it show up in my live stream, so I can't really put it in here. But I will also friend you and message you. How about I get you the link that way? Okay. And sometimes the company website at Unicity gets a little bit bogged down. And so it can take, I know that there's been times when it just takes a while for that page to load, but I'll get you the direct link to order, Chrissy. And then you can tell me too, if you want, what's going on with you, and we can help decipher how the system can best help you. I'm totally down with that. And you guys, will see you in the morning. Have a blessed day. Okay, you too. Jana. Okay, I don't know what's happening because every time I test those links, they're all working. So the best I can say is it may be your cache needs cleared or your phone needs reset or something, but I'll get you the link. Okay, so I will get that to you now. Have a great day, guys.